You're listening to the No Gray Areas podcast with Patrick McCullough. Today's guest is Michael Bartel, founder and director of Free International. Michael brings awareness to human trafficking and explains how we can prevent it by collaborating. Let's dive in.
Michael, welcome to the No Gray Areas podcast. So good to have you here. We actually have a connection that goes a little ways back in our work lives. It goes back about a decade, I think. But we found out once we met that we go way back before that, right? We're both Montana boys.
Both Montana, Missoula, Montana.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for listeners, Montana is that big, huge state up near Canada that few people have heard of other than they see the Rocky Mountains.
And they like it that way too.
And they, yes. Anybody from Montana is like, don't tell anybody about it. But we're not only from the same state, we're from the same little town. So
yeah, absolutely. And my wife and daughter, if they could do what we were doing and still live in Montana, that's where we'd be.
Yeah. And my wife is also she's from small town Helmville, Montana, which is by Lincoln. You know where that is.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So, but that was crazy. So the way we met all these years ago is I was working with the anti-human trafficking movement. You actually have an organization. You started anti-human trafficking movement. So we met, we were both doing some things. We actually connected, man. I immediately am like, gosh, I love this guy. This is a great guy. But then it was cool to find out we actually came from the same small town in Montana. But let's dig right into that then. So you, first of all, Free International. Tell us quickly what that is.
Well, FREE is actually an acronym. I'm not an acronym guy, but it worked with what we were doing, and it stands for Find, Restore, Embrace, and Empower.
Okay.
And so we started back in 2007 after having spent 4 years in Southern Asia working with human trafficking, another organization.
Yeah.
And it was our response to communities. Every time we'd come back and tell those stories out of India, where we were primarily based, people are like, oh man, what can we do? What can we put our hand to? Mm-hmm. Almost to a person that would come up and talk to us. And so FREE was our response to that. How do we build capacity here in the United States to address that type of vulnerability and exploitation here? And so that's how FREE was founded.
And when was that founded?
2007.
Okay. So at that time, because that's when we met, met right around that time. That's when we had made a documentary here in Greater Phoenix area with our Vice Squad, because a lot of it at that time was just raising awareness, right? Mm-hmm. I think most people know now that happens, but early in those days, you were having to convince people that that's not just something that's happening over in Asia, that's happening in our own backyard, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we found through the process too. I mean, our original context to learn about what was going on in the world was the international context. In fact, our origin story, my wife and I were working at Purdue University, and she ran the international center there, which was the cultural hub. We had 142 countries represented. And she also did the friendship program. So anytime students were coming in from around the world, she did all their orientations. Yeah. She'd try to connect them into families in the community. And we were setting up for an event one day. African student struck up a friendship with him in a conversation. And he began to kind of tell me his dreams when he went back to his country, because he had nephews and cousins that had been sold into labor camps and nieces as young as 8 sold into the brothels. That was January of 1995 when he told me that. And if you gave me a sketch artist, I could still probably game that room out. It just was one of those significant moments in our life. And
that really changed the trajectory of your life.
Changed everything. We didn't get all in until a few years later, but it just never escaped my wife and I's conversations. And we were pastoring, and it was a big part of our prayer with the church and the internationals that were in our church. And so we just got to a point as people, raised among farmers and ranchers, kind of really, get her done, put the boots on, go to work type people. We just couldn't talk about it anymore. We had to figure out how to do something about it.
You had to do something. So you guys went over to Asia.
Yeah, we went to India.
And you're seeing this, you're seeing this firsthand there.
Yeah, red light districts there. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously a different context than the States, but we worked with some great nationals from all over India. They would take us into incredibly large red light districts where very young girls were being exploited. Wasn't hard to see there, but figuring out what to do about it in that context was, obviously unique to how we would engage it here in the States. But that solidified it for us. I mean, we knew it would, but you don't know until you're in the mix, and listening to God, what direction he wants you to go with what you're seeing, with what you're engaging with. Yeah. And that's just how it took root in our lives.
Well, and let me just pause and say this for the audience to hear this too, because I worked with this issue. I mean, there's no other evil that is worse than this. And this is, I just have huge respect for you and your family, your team that's been involved in this for so long. I was deeply entrenched in this and working on the front lines with this as you are for a handful of years. And I think I'm still recovering from that. You're hearing the darkest, most horrific stories, and it wrenches your heart. And so, I mean, I just have huge respect. You can see it coming out right now.
Thanks,
still affects me. So I appreciate that you're still in the trenches with it. So just to help, I think, us understand, you brought a couple of things which are really fascinating when we unpack what you're doing. This right here is something you were just doing a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that the Big Search actually is one of our main programs that we do. We do day-to-day work, all our people around the country do. But one of the things that just has really always tripped my trigger, my entry point into working with a lot of these issues here in the States, as far as seeing it at a much larger level, was we jumped on with Super Bowl outreach.
Yep.
The very first Super Bowl outreach, when we got back from India, Brad Dennis, who's now on our team, actually was with class kids, and he was the one who identified what was going on. Not just at the Super Bowl, but anytime you brought all this disposable income into an area in a short period of time, just the increase of vulnerability and exploitation.
Yeah.
And so he started a Super Bowl outreach. And man, it just tripped my trigger to see that first one we did. We had about 80 volunteers for 3 days in Miami. The Miami Vice law enforcement down there we're working directly with gave us all their missing kids that had been gone at least 3 months and were likely, or they knew for certain, were being exploited, trafficked. And so those 80 people over those 3 days, and they weren't 80 people every day, it was just spread out over those 3 days. We were able to clear 3 precincts worth of missing kids off the books. 8 traffic victims were recovered. I think 3 pimps all got nabbed and went to prison over that. And that just energized me so much. Obviously, the success of it, but to see when different groups and faith partners and everything work together and have the right faces in front of them to search for as well, right? We weren't just giving red flags. We were showing real faces of people
like you
who
were
need
literally
to be found.
looking for individuals with names.
Right.
Yeah.
And people go, man, how'd you find so many kids? And this one, we had 45 kids we were able to find over about 6 weeks. The community piece to it was
this is the one
3
that was
days
in
long.
Vegas just a little
45
while ago.
kids. Yep.
Yeah.
And people go, how do you find so many kids? And ultimately, it's because we were looking for them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can't find what you're not looking for.
Yeah.
And so to create an environment, especially within a community like Phoenix, we did the Super Bowl here. We did it, as in partnership with you out of your church. And just to see the success of those who are being recovered, but more than that, see the light bulbs go on in people's eyes on how when we work together and when we're on the same page with a common task and communicating, how successful things can be. And so we just kept going with the big searches, and we're, we're like 30 big searches now. We have 10 lined up over the next year that we're going to do. And that was our first one this year.
Well, and that's one of the things. I've known you now for over 10 years, like I said, and your organization is so good at partnering. I think that's one of the reasons you've had such great success, is you recognize the value of collaboration. You and I have both seen the messiness of that. It's really messy, but you collaborate really well. You try to partner, you try to work well together. When you go into a city, you're trying to work with the people that are in that city, whether it be the Vice Squad, the FBI, the local churches and communities. But if most of our listeners are listening, they're not watching, but if they could see me, I'm paging through this booklet that you have, and there's literally page after page of individuals, missing since October 2021. It gives the name, gives her picture here, and there's pages of it.
Yeah, and we're always strategic with the kids that we end up looking for. I mean, all kids are worth being searched for and found, right? Yeah. But especially in Vegas, we have, just countless missing kids. You can't put all those faces in front of people pragmatically and have any of it stick in people's minds. And so we work with the social workers in Vegas. We have a specialized crew of social workers in Las Vegas called Aries, which is a whole crew of them that just focus on the CSEC kids, the commercially sexually exploited children in our community. And so the kids we look for, we kind of know their intake. We know the different stories behind, whether they're being trafficked or at least the level of risk, they are, considering their backgrounds. And so to do that strategic intake, allows us to kind of understand, the nature of what we're looking for. Not all of them are trafficked. And when we go into a community, this is one of those things that we're able to really draw a lot of attention to. We're on the news. We're doing all this stuff because a community is searching for its kids, right? And then people come forward and go, well, yeah, aren't they just runaways? Aren't they? And that creates a great educational moment because awareness, that we've talked about is so key. But the context to which this exploitation happens or this vulnerability is created is important. It's all right, let's talk about that.
So
why would they go missing?
Again, there's probably a lot that are listening right now that would think that. They're like, well, a lot of these kids are just runaways. So help educate them, help them be aware on how exploited these kids are.
Well, Brad Dennis, who started this, he always has a statement. He goes, hey, kids are running away for one of two reasons. They're running away from something, or they're running to something. And actually the predators that would want to take advantage of that, all they have to do to exploit the situation is figure out what that is. What is it there? Why are they leaving? Is it because there's abuse in the home? Is it because whatever's going on there? Then he can fill that role of protector, provider, whatever it might be. If they just, have wanderlust and just want to get out there, then you just, paint the big picture of parties and everything else you can be a part of. And so the nature of why kids run away, and there's some kids out there that are just, got annoyed because they got disciplined and are couch surfing. We don't put those in our book, right? I mean, those situations need to be addressed, obviously, but that's not the point of the big search. But that education, that goes beyond awareness. It's like, okay, good question. Why are they running away? And that lets us draw the curtain even back further. So even once we find them, how do those who are wanting to get involved more and more engage upstream from where this exploitation happens in the first place, right? How do we implant our churches and our community not-for-profits into areas where that vulnerability, that engagement will make the most good and prevent this from happening.
Yeah, and when you're talking about the predators feeding into that, finding whatever that is, that need, that they're masters at that. Again, someone who maybe has not worked in this area has no idea how evil and how masterful they are at manipulating people, manipulating young girls or young boys. And like you said, whether they need, hey, I can protect you. Or, you want to have the fun life? I can provide the fun life, painting this dream for them. But I mean, someone who hasn't worked with this have no idea. In fact, that leads to this next thing that's on the table here. You brought this, you were just explaining this to me. So again, if someone's listening and not watching, it's a piece of paper that's folded several times. It's written completely on front and back.
Corner to corner, top to bottom.
Corner to corner, top to bottom. Tell us where you got this and what this is.
Well, I because of what I do, I get invited into some interesting areas to have these conversations. And I was brought in monthly to a high security prison somewhere in this country. And there was about 50 guys, all basically in for life, that really hated human trafficking, right? And many of it because it touched them personally. As soon as they were removed from their situation, their daughters were trafficked or whatever. I mean, there was a real emotional attachment to what this is. And I was given this, it's handwritten, this sheet's handwritten. And one of the pimps that had been put into prison for the long haul had this on his person when he went to the prison. So they took it from him and they gave it to me. And it's his rules on how he controlled his girls, his women that he was working as prostitutes. And it's, like you said, it's just pure evil. I mean, it's purely manipulative. And really that's the key where a lot of this education has gone, as you know, over the years too, is, hey, why didn't these girls just run away? They weren't chained to the bed, right? Yeah. They're not physically detained. And then when you realize, from the background of this girl's life, how this person manipulated them, those chains are all tied up in their head, which are really the strongest chains, they have anyway.
Well, a phrase that I often heard, and you've heard for years too, it's easy to get the girl out of the brothel, but not the brothel out of her head, right? Or the trafficking victim. I mean, again, they've been so brainwashed, someone has no idea. This right here, if they could read, like I'm looking over this, it's disgusting. It's evil. I couldn't even read it out loud because of what it says here. We'd have to beep out all kinds of stuff. But this is literally cut from every corner of the page, front and back, a guy writing about how to manipulate and keep a a victim trafficked.
Yeah, and a lot of it's tied to identity, right? If you can get them to just buy into this is who I am, this is what my lot in life is, it's so hard to pry, somebody away from that whole scenario. And so that identity piece oftentimes is built in long before that pimp ever got into the picture, right? They were molested at home or, whatever the situation might be. And so, yeah, I mean, those chains are so difficult to break. So oftentimes, the find of our name oftentimes is the easiest part. I mean, it's not easy, but once you start looking, you're gonna learn how to find what you're looking for. It's that whole back end piece that takes so long to really see the
recovery piece.
Yeah,
right?
so it's baby steps in the right direction to attain a new identity and attain value in who you are, especially created in Christ's image.
Yeah. Why would someone, not that we want to get inside the mind of a pimp, but why would someone do this? Like, why would they get into this? Like, let's say someone's going in the criminal world. Why not sell drugs or sell what's like? Why would someone going into selling human beings?
Well, there's a financial piece to it, right?
Huge financial pieces.
Yeah, I mean, when you're dealing drugs, you can only you can only sell that drug once, right? But you can sell that girl, that boy, that transgender youth over and over and over and over again, right? It's like a reusable product, so to speak. Also, it's easier in the legal system to explain away, right? I mean, you find a kilo in somebody's trunk, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You got a 14-year-old girl in your back seat, especially with, our law enforcement are better and better equipped to understand what this is. But there's still a whole lot of layers of things that you have to go through, and we have fewer and fewer hours in the day our law enforcement have to deal with this. It's just a lot easier to skirt the law, in the middle of it. Yeah. And so, in fact, a lot of the adult meaning over 18, that we work with don't want to, when they say they want help, a lot of times that legal piece, they just want to leave behind. They just want to start a new life. They don't even want to engage with the court system. Don't want to look that predator in the eye.
Yep. Triggering all kinds of things. Yeah.
And all that's part of the reason it's so easy to, control. And that's why you see so many young ladies that are wrapped up in this too. It's not that, I hear a lot of people thinking we got way more pedophiles and than we realize in this country and in the world, but the pimps aren't really looking for children to prostitute to pedophiles. They're looking for young people to keep manipulated and have them oftentimes look like they're of age, right? Because a lot of these Johns aren't showing up looking for children. They're looking for young, but they're not looking for children. And so if you can shade that line enough, it's a lot easier to control a 16-year-old girl than it is a woman, unless she's been in it all the time, right?
Yeah, and we've heard the horror stories about that. And what's interesting for me, and you've been doing this a lot longer, but I know when I back up and think through all those stories on the many, many, many women that I sat down and heard their stories, when you backed up, though, I never heard one that didn't go back to some kind of abuse in their past, which is, that's it's just unveiling a whole nother evil that, and I'm sure there's probably some exceptions that you've run into, but I never ran into a single exception that it didn't back up to some kind of abuse that they had in their life.
Or neglect, right? Yes. Because, really one of the biggest, if not the biggest, vulnerability for those who end up being trafficked is just self-esteem, right? And self-esteem is built up.
Pimps feed on that, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, that's why, and I don't say this to, me, I don't go casting fear anywhere, but we got to be mindful. When parents come to me, they're scared to death about their daughter being trafficked. And I had a daughter. I 100% understand that. But it's almost impossible to have your daughter trafficked in an intact family where, the dad loves on their daughter and is present in her life. Almost impossible, right? They're Teflon. It's just, that has no appeal. That lie has no place to land because they're already got that safety. They got that protection. They got that love. Yeah. And so do abductions happen? Do all that happen? Yeah, it's very, very rare. It happens. You got to be mindful. You also got to be involved in your kids' lives as far as where they're at on social media. And, because if our kids have access to the world, which is awesome, the world also has access to them. So to put the right boundaries is good parenting. It's not overprotective. It's wisdom, because that's where these guys will look. Because if you're complaining about dad on social media, then I'm going to come in and say, I can be your dad, right? I can be your daddy and play that role. Yeah. So be very present in your kids' lives for sure.
Well, this isn't anything new either. Again, I'm holding a book in my hand that you brought, that you were just talking to me about. It's very interesting. It's got a newer cover on it, but that's because you put it on there. Someone gave this to you. So again, sometimes if someone thought like, well, this is something new that's happening in our world, or social media is causing this, or it isn't. It's an evil that's been around for a while. In fact, explain this book a little bit.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, he's a historian actually, and he sent me a text out of the blue one day and said, hey, do you want this book? And I looked at the cover, and it was an old looking cover. And the exact title of this book is How to Prevent the Traffic in Girls. And it blew my mind because just that word traffic, or the trafficking word, was new to me. I mean, we understand slavery. We've heard that word for years, but trafficking is a term. And then I saw this book was printed in 1899.
So in 1899, over 120 some years ago, they printed a book about how to prevent the trafficking of girls, which, like you said, seems like it's a newer term, a terminology like slavery. We've heard. No. So over 120 years ago, they were writing books about it.
And the book actually is an outgrowth of a conference, a symposium that rescue mission workers and social workers were having, because they were seeing the growth of trafficking. And so they got together. I mean, human trafficking conference in the mid 1890s, dealing with this very issue and the vulnerabilities in our own country and the growth of and this is less than 40 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, right?
Yeah.
And this book just staggered me, not because it surprised me. I mean, it didn't surprise me. I mean, I know throughout history, God always sets apart a people, to be present for the issues, that are at hand. We saw it with the Salvation Army, right? The Salvation Army as an organization started as basically an anti-human trafficking outrage.
Most people don't know that. Yeah. I think most people think, they're ringing the bells and raising money for hungry people, but it started as an anti-human trafficking organization.
Yeah. And I don't know if they knew it was anti-trafficking then, but it was an outreach to prostituted women on the streets of London. That's how it started, right? And over the years, the Salvation Army has been engaged with matters of this here and there, and there's certain ones of them around the world that focus on these issues of trafficking. But yeah, I was just staggered by if you read this book, and I'll try to get it to you. The focus of the predators is so similar to today. Like when we're doing trainings or whatever on that, it's worded a little different, but the exact same MO, focusing on the vulnerability and then using maybe not language like you read on this paper, but a similar approach to wrap that kid up in their head and be able to take advantage of their situation. And so their thing was, look, if we can't get ahead of this, if we can't fish upstream on this, and they'll say that almost verbatim in this book, because all these people do outreach to victims when this book was read. In fact, they use the term rescue. Rescue's a term that the trafficking movement doesn't like to use. Survivors do not like that term. So we respect that. I understand that. But they would use the term rescue. They go, everybody wants to hear the stories of the rescue, right? And we do that. So they weren't saying that's bad. They're saying that's an aspect of what we do. But 100 years from now, we're going to have a bigger problem with this if we can't get upstream of it. That's the whole conference, and here we are.
And that's what we were talking about. I mean, you still are, but when I was working with the issue, we were always saying that. We're like, for every, and again, I know this isn't the term that the survivors like to use, but for every girl that's rescued, we would like to see 100 or 1,000 that were prevented from going into it. So they were talking about that over 100 years ago. We're still talking about that today, about how to prevent it.
Well, when we got a school assembly program, it was fascinating to me. We started that about a decade ago now. We've been in front of over 500,000 students. And right before COVID, shut down, right before COVID shut down. The 2 months of school assemblies we did leading into COVID, there was actually 19 cases of trafficking that were identified out of those schools in those 2 months. And there was 160 plus cases of mandatory report situations, molestation, rape, abuse, that came out of a willingness to be able to talk about these difficult issues and vulnerabilities at the right age, in the right setting, that created a safe environment for them to come forward. And in fact, the school assemblies are out there right now. They went all last week, first one since COVID shut everything down, and today and tomorrow. But the schools are such an important place for us to empower conversations that are going to reveal vulnerabilities in a way to help.
Preventing it from happening. That girl who might have been susceptible to this, or that boy that might have been susceptible to this, are hearing some things, and now maybe and only eternity will we know how many kids were truly prevented. I mean, that's the other difficult thing about that, is it's hard to measure the success of that, because you'll never really know. So tell us a little bit, what are some of the things that you do? Free International. So you've mentioned a couple. You do the school assemblies, you do the huge mobile units, the rescues. You do some stuff where you're going into strip clubs and brothels, right? And share some of that.
Our outreach pieces are consistent and daily, and they look different depending on where our people live, right? Yeah. So we base Free International in Las Vegas. That's pretty much low-hanging fruit there, right? Yeah. When I lived in India, the people of India who'd never left India knew of Vegas's reputation. They go, "Oh, you're here doing that? Are you guys doing stuff in Las Vegas back in your country?" And I heard that probably a dozen times when I lived in India. It was crazy. And it made sense to me, but the reputation Vegas had done. So our day-to-day there's not a day you can't walk down a lot of places in Vegas and just do direct targeted outreach, try to build trust and relationships. We have a drop-in center in Las Vegas, so just a reprieve from the streets, let's say, right? We have just a place to hang out, Netflix, they can watch whatever. We got showers, washer, dryers, so they can come, and we just have people who understand trauma, being able to interact with them in a way that we can build trust to hopefully off-road them. Our mobile units, one of the things we learned when we first looking at our name Free, when my wife and I first started Free and we were considering a name, we saw it really as a timeline driven. You find them and you work on restoring them and embracing them and empowering them. But what we really found, and again, it wasn't surprising, is we were identifying people after we were working with them to get them in better situation. And that's where the mobile units came in. We were offered by a group called Speed the Light, $500,000 worth of mobile equipment. So we got originally two large mobile units that we primarily use as a way to collaboratively bring our strongest partners, but put it in the middle of where the need is, right? Find our most vulnerable neighborhoods and then provide services toward the people we want to get help to right down the block, right in their parking lot of their weekly rental place or whatever. Yeah. That would be legal, medical, dental. We do tattoo removals, because speaking of identity and this sheet, pimps will brand their girls, and so the faster you can get that off them, the better space you can be in to get them to these next steps. And so
they'll literally, again, to help the audience know, like they'll tattoo the girl, so that every time, let's say that tattoo's on her, her left part of her chest, every time she pulls her shirt off, looks in the mirror, it says property of K-Mac or property of whatever her
or there'll be money
is.
Bags here because you're my money maker, or they'll tattoo their name straight on their eyebrow.
It's a subtle way for them to continue to
own you. You are mine, right? And the faster you can, you can, and it's interesting as we do this day-to-day outreach, because we can offer that service. That's the one thing that we'll always get double looks on when we say, hey, we can help with X, Y, or Z. Whatever you need, we'll get you those next steps. The one thing that'll make them do the double take back at you is, and you go, I can take that. Especially if it's a former pimp or whatever. We can get that off. We can do it right now. Yeah. And
the tattoo removal is the thing that they...
Huge, we just try to be strategic and all right, we want to build trust and we never want to promise things we can't deliver on. And usually we just use community partners, because to me that's how you do it, right? You build that collaborative framework where everyone gets to be involved. Even if they're doing a for-profit business, they want to be able to help, we want to do it. But the shorter distance we can make between them saying, yeah, I'll take you up on that, to when we can start the process, the better chance we got at staying in their life long enough to hopefully give them other options.
Yeah.
And so that restore piece is really a huge part of our mobile units. We got mobile medical, we got a lot of different things that allow us to be logically, plausibly present in neighborhoods a face like mine normally wouldn't, would just stick out in and not be able to make a difference. It allows us that access to the community, because ultimately we want that for this type of evil to go back to prevention, to change. We need to build healthy community within these broken communities, and that's where we get the on-road churches, church plants, building resources around inner city churches that have a great reputation. The pastor and the people of that church are trusted, but that's all they have is their name and their trust.
Yeah.
We get to come in with our services and add services to that trust and see more people off-roaded. So the mobile units are huge for us. We got about $1.5 million worth of those, and allows us to be very present wherever this need is. Yeah. We have broader partnerships with Major League Baseball. We're doing Strike Out Slavery, one of the founding not-for-profits with Albert and Dee Dee Pujols, which has been excellent in creating inroads to more collaborative partnerships in these cities. Mm-hmm. In fact, long-term, Strike Out Slavery wants to have our big search, which is what we were talking about we did in Vegas, and in each of the major league cities. So every time we do a Strike Out Slavery, we use it as a way to engage volunteers to come help us in the search for these kids that we're looking for.
Yeah.
We have a shelter we launched. In fact, that's where you helped us a ton back, because it's a big part of what you were doing. Yeah. So we have a shelter in the Midwest for trafficked. We started as a place for trafficked minors. Mm-hmm. And then because of COVID and the resources that kind of dried up a little bit during COVID, we went to over 18, and we still have plans to re-engage that minors side. Yeah. But we have a shelter there. And we're getting ready to launch a national ministry and training center, which is going to allow us, our hope is to take primarily, but not exclusively, the faith community and be able to tighten that net of being able to find those who are being exploited and engage a national network of real resources and help through that process. Yeah. To bring in and professionally train first responders, law enforcement, military people, and then on the quarter to be able to we're going to work with Albert and Dee Dee Pujols in launching like a culinary program for survivors. So we're working with a survivor network that we've worked with for years and years and years, where they can take their young ladies who are ready to take those next steps, give them a real career option, be able to train them, some real certified training in the field, and then with our connections in like Vegas and Nashville and some other places, be able to plug them into some employment that brings some dignity to their lives.
Yeah, man, you guys are just doing amazing work. And again, I love how you guys are doing the collaboration. When we talk about some of this stuff, here's the difficult thing for us as human beings, as you know. As human beings, when we start talking about things and we have statistics and numbers, and it's hard for us to wrap our minds around it. So maybe just share a couple of stories that can put I know you have to change the name probably, but give us a name and a face that will help us understand. These are individuals we're talking about. They're not just a number.
Yeah. Well, we had one recently in a city we did one of our big searches in. We were talking with her social worker. She was 17. Let's call her Diamond. And Diamond's file with her social worker was over an inch thick. And she went right to page 1, and she's like, I just want to make sure, basically, she's still alive, right? I think she's just want a wellness check on her, if anything else. So her story was she, at less than 2 weeks old, her mom tried to sell her at a laundromat. And then every page in that binder for the rest of her life until 17 was incest, molestation, prostitution, abuse, day in, day out. She did not have a day in her life that she breathed without trauma, right? And so, I've done this a long time. We go back to 2003 when we started full time. I saw similar things in India, which is a whole similar but different context, because you're dealing with a generational, caste system and a theological structure that, kind of enhances that, which are huge to break through on. But in her situation, I mean, her brain wasn't even formed in the way the rest of us are, right?
Yeah.
You could have waved
trauma.
You could have waved the healthiest, and we found her, right? We found her. And she had ways to, when she was found, she would go acute, or she would, pretend to lose her mind because they knew they would place her in a certain place, and she knew how to escape it every time. And when we do these big searches, since we know the intake and the kind of the background and the parents and or the foster parents or the, whatever the scenario is, we work in, when we do find them, which we intend to, what is it we need to do, on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just running around finding people and going, okay, now it's yours to deal with. How do we engage that structure, whatever it's going to look like? And every kid's different. Every situation's different. And so we got her set up and got her in. And she was 6 months in this. It wasn't a program; it was more detainment, but it got her to those next steps, and we were able to see her come out. And I won't get into her whole story. It's been pretty traumatic with her, but she's one of those people as well. Going back to the tattoo removal, she when she got out last time, she got with a different pimp. He tattooed her on her face, and so she wants to get her tattoo off, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so the simple trust, we've never overpromised anything with her, ever. Everything we've promised, we've delivered on. And because of that, even though she's been back in this life multiple times, and that's not uncommon, but the first people she'll call when she's in a bind is now us. Yeah. And our hope with that is that we can work her into a much more successful story than we have so far. To us, the monstrous win is we have access into her life now when she is at her lowest, right? And she's 18 now, so she's not going to end up on any missing kid report or anything, but we'll always pursue her. We'll always pursue her and be present. But that story just opened my eyes, even as somebody who's done this forever, how young this exploitation happens.
2 weeks old, you said.
But before the pimp ever enters the scene, right? And so how much empathy that builds into our approach now, because, we don't expect majority of these girls, and not just girls, but a majority of these kids to go, oh, you came to get me, right? And hug me.
They're not running to you with open arms.
No.
There's so much abuse and trauma.
In fact, many times you're the enemy that's been built in by the predator in the process. But that's just a very, maybe not at the level of her life, but that is a very common reason why more and more people need to be involved, but understand what being involved means, because finding, like the book says, those quote unquote rescues are awesome, but that is so small a piece to this puzzle that needs engaging.
And there's so many different layers and elements that we can do that are preventative. Someone's maybe helping with something like literacy or something, and they don't realize you're actually helping with literacy. You're helping prevent future potential trafficking issues. So there's so much that layers that go into it.
Well, and you build community trust too. So just in brief, another story, we consistently will mobilize groups and churches to do ongoing work in really sensitive areas. Like one in particular we were at in Las Vegas. It had the highest violent crime rate in the state of Nevada. Violent crime rate in the state of Nevada was on this one property, almost 1,000 rooms. People lived there. It was a weekly rental place. It was the biggest, brightest red dot in the whole state was on that property. And so we started showing up with our mobile units and our partners on a weekly basis, cooking pancakes, just building trust. And we were going into a big search, and we decided to go there for the morning for a couple hours, and we brought food, and there were a lot of ministers there. So we were hearing people's stories, praying for them, telling testimonies, just very, very awesome morning. Went across the street to the Starbucks, and within 5 minutes, we're all there. It was 20 of us, over 20 of us in the Starbucks. And while we're standing in the Starbucks, in walks 3 girls, and the 2 on the outside saw our shirts. It said search team on it, right? We're very overt. They pointed to the girl in the middle and said, she's missing. She needs help. Okay, so we started to get her story. She's just turned 15. She's pregnant with either her father or her pimp's baby. She didn't know which one, right? So you knew home wasn't the place, and she wasn't in our book for who we were searching for. We start helping her. Less than 5 minutes later, in walks this couple. They see our shirts and instantly start weeping in a Starbucks while we're still waiting for our coffee. Straight up happened, just like I'm saying it. So we go over, hey, how can we help? Well, they'd been in town. They were from Virginia. They'd been in town all week looking for their daughter, who was 19. But bad things were going on. They knew it. They hadn't gotten anywhere. They had guns pulled on them, whatever. Because, man, if my daughter goes, you can, I don't care what door.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be Satan's door himself. You're knocking on that
Yeah.
door for your daughter, right?
Yeah.
But they hadn't gotten anywhere. They had to fly out the next day. And they literally sat in the parking lot of that Starbucks and said a prayer to God. You got to help us. We got to fly out tomorrow. And they walk in the Starbucks and they see 25 people with search team shirts on, right? We ended up finding her daughter. She's doing great. By the end of that day, out of that one Starbucks, we had 8 recoveries happen. Almost all of them tied to the fact that people would come forward and go, oh, we heard we could trust you because you guys have been doing stuff in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Presence is everything in being able to get where, I mean, some of these stories we're talking about as far as finding these kids and their situation require some specialized skills and people on our team. But by and large, a majority of it, if we can be upstream in the middle of the vulnerability, be consistent and honest and trustworthy, those stories start to come out. And not only do we prevent it, but people are like, that's my life. I need help. And then they just start coming to you. And that's what happened at that Starbucks that day. 8.
Well, and Michael, I learned firsthand from that to trust. I don't know if you remember this, but my wife and I were on a staycation here in Greater Phoenix. You remember this? You called me. You called me up and you said there's a girl that you guys had started working with years before.
Oh yeah.
And she all of a sudden put in a call for you. You had no idea. You had just done some stuff with that.
Yeah,
her.
I remember now.
And all of a sudden she called and she said, I'm in Phoenix. I got away from my pimp for a few hours. I need some help. So you called me and you were like, and anyway, remember?
Yeah, we were in New Jersey.
Yes.
So I remember that was awesome.
We ended up rescuing this girl, but it was because of some things that your team had done with her that built up enough trust. It took her a while, but it built up enough trust that she got away from her pimp for a moment, made a phone call, and we got her out of there and in a safe place. So again, that trust is so critical.
Yeah, anyone can build trust.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that's a big, huge piece of even all these years in, what drives me is when that light bulb goes on, that I don't have to be special forces and kick down doors to go find those who need help. I just need to find a logical reason to be in this neighborhood collaboratively. Shouldn't be yourself, but I mean, working with groups to be present in the vulnerability will reveal, those who need help. And as they begin to trust you, traffic victims will start telling you their story. Sure.
So, man, love what you're doing, and I know that there's some listeners going, I want to know how we can help or support or learn more about this. How do they get a hold of you? How do they contact your organization?
You can get a hold of us on our website, which is freeinternational.org, FREE international.org. We're on social media under the same name, and we have a lot of ways we work to on-road people to work with us. Although we don't take individual volunteers from around the country, I mean, that wouldn't even be plausible. We want people to connect locally with what's going on. And where there isn't local, maybe you can lead and we can help you kind of generate some points of contact in these vulnerable neighborhoods. But we have the big search that started as a Super Bowl outreach. We're doing 4 more of those this year, 4 next year, maybe more. So we're going to be in Orlando this year, in Chicago, and at the World Games this year. And then next year, we're going to be in North Jersey and Detroit and Las Vegas. And so we take teams in all the time. We want to come in and just for that 4 or 5 days around a big search, they'll be educated. They'll be able to kind of see these things in motion to see how it can, be a part of what they're doing. And if you're a church or a college group or a community group, we bring teams all the time into Vegas and give a really good education, but not an education that's disconnected from practice. You're gonna really be involved. The ladies will be out at the legal brothels trying to minister to those girls, or in the strip clubs with our ladies who do work in the strip clubs. Dudes aren't that's not for you.
Yeah.
But
Last
but
place
there's
we
a
should be.
but just connect with us on social media or at our website and shoot us a line, and we'll connect.
And
you
again,
from
I
there.
saw firsthand. So when you were doing that Super Bowl search and our church was partnering with you and we had mobilized some of our people, I still see, when I see your stuff on social media, I see some of the people that were involved liking your stuff. And I think all these years later, they're still connected and they're still having an impact. It had a major impact. Let me plug this for you, because I know it's always uncomfortable for you to do this, but even financially, you guys are doing a lot of really, really good things. It takes money for some of that stuff. And so I would love to encourage the audience. I know you well. I know your organization. I know it's a trusted organization. You have a great reputation, but man, if they're looking for a place to say, man, God has given us a gift here and we'd love to support financially someone. Free International is a great organization.
Well, I appreciate that. And just a little side note to that, our whole team is awesome in that almost 100% of our whole team is self-funded, meaning they've all raised their own individual support. So they're fully paid volunteers for our organization. And so any money that ever comes to Free literally goes all to the mobile units and the in the school assemblies and all that stuff just become part of where that goes, not to somebody's salary. Not that they wouldn't be deserving of having a salary, but they believe in it enough that they generated their own, which helped us during COVID, because we didn't lose anyone from the team, and we're able to push forward and do even more things during COVID years than we ever thought possible.
Human trafficking didn't stop during COVID?
No, in fact, we got busier during COVID because a lot of that trust factor. Girls that rejected our help for 2 and 3 years previous, all of a sudden were like, okay, show me what you got. And so when we got our shot with them, we came through. I mean, we can't promise the world if we don't have the world to promise, but we're going to be honest, and we're going to come through with everything we say.
So let me land the plane. Let me finish with this. You're one of my heroes because I love how your family have lived this out. The danger for all of us as human beings is, we basically just start taking up oxygen on this planet, right? It's not why any of us were created. It's not why any of us were put here. All of us were put here to make a difference. What would you say to someone who's listening? It may not even be specifically with this issue of human trafficking, but someone who's maybe been moved by what you've said, and they start going, I want to do something. I want to make a difference. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, the wanting to is the first step for sure. And I think you got to find reputable things near you to just jump in, right? I mean, collaboration trips my trigger, but there's a real humility in collaborating, because you can't want to control everything going on. Obviously, you want those who are involved to have an understanding of what they're dealing with, right? And if you're wanting more and more to get involved, especially directly with survivors of trafficking, you need to find good education on what trauma does to people, how they respond, having gone through their trauma. That's not just a hoop to jump through. That's if you really want to gain trust and connect with people, you need to know how to communicate to them. If I'm a missionary going to India, I need to learn the language of India to know how to engage within that culture. And trauma creates its own unique language set that you would want to know if you really want to gain that trust of people. And then you just can't take yourself too seriously. You obviously want to loving somebody's serious business, whether you're married or it's somebody you just met who's been exploited. You got to have a humility. You got to be a good listener, and have a good support base, a great church to connect to, because I know a lot of the people who ended up working with us even have come out of their own background of abuse or trauma or whatever, and you want to set yourself up for success when some of those triggers start to flip. You need to have a strong support base.
Because that's going to be part of their healing journey.
Their own healing journey.
But they need a support base to that.
And so if you're part of a church, we will never take individual volunteers in apart from knowing how well they're connected, especially if they're coming from a church or a church background. That way everybody comes out the back end healthier, rejoicing for not only what God is doing and helping us find and restore those being exploited, but in our own lives as we grow healthier and putting one step in front of the other to follow him with our callings.
Yeah. Well, man, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for taking the time to come down here. Love what you're doing. I hope there's a way that our audience and we can be involved in what you're doing. one of the things that we do always to finish off our time is the two truths and a lie. There's irony in it because we call ourselves no gray areas, but it's maybe this has been a heavy subject we talked about today, so this might be a lighthearted way to finish up. So let's see if the audience or me can be stumped by your two truths and a lie.
So I had to consult my family. I've been married 28 years now, and I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old son.
Yeah.
Right, named him Dylan Cash after Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash, right?
Yeah.
And
Nice.
Veronica Grace is my daughter. And so I had to consult them on these things. So here are the three we came up with. One, I am a descendant of the person that the story of Robin Hood is based on. Two, I was bullied as a child because I brought a sock puppet my mom made to school for show and tell. Three, I am 1/8 Yavapai from the Yavapai tribe.
Oh, man.
So
These might be some of the best ones I've heard because I've known you for a while. Okay,
it was a collaborative thing.
I'm going to go with the, because I'm from Montana too. I have some Native American in me too. So I'm going to guess that one's true. You probably have some.
1/8. That is actually my lie.
No!
I called my friend, Paul Russell, who's vice president of the
Yeah.
Yavapai tribe here in town, one of the greatest men I know, one of my best friends. And I said, is it all right if I claim to be Yavapai today?
Yes.
He goes, yeah, but only 1/8. You
Yes.
can only be 1/8.
So
So the other two are true. I was bullied because of my mom's sock puppet.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. Had nothing to do
Was
with
that your
you.
senior year in high school?
Yeah, it was freshman year of college. I was bullied for my sock puppet. And I am a descendant of whoever.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
My dad found that out 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. So the whole Robin Hood story, that's in your
Whoever,
family line.
whoever, I think there's a lot of different Robin Hoods depending on what country in Europe you're in. But I'm attached to one of those myths, whoever the story was based on.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm a descendant of that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you stump. I usually get one right. I usually get them right, but I get one right at least, even if I'm wrong. You stumped me right away. So nice job. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Appreciate what you're doing. Our prayers are with you. Keep up the fight, my friend.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the No Gray Areas podcast. To dive deeper into the story, be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and check out nograyAreas.com.